they were the cover for a medical mission. The helicopter lost its top rotor blade and they didn't make it back.
Tom went to the Army, and then he did something that I thought was absolutely stupid. He learned how to jump out of perfectly good airplanes, but he loved it. And it was the last day of the war. I worked in Walmart, and we found out the war had ended. I was ecstatic when I went home and came home to a driveway full of cars, not knowing at that time till my stepson came out and told me Tommy was gone.
Tommy's death was in the newspaper, and I wanted somebody to talk to because it wasn't like World War II and Vietnam when everybody had a neighbor who'd lost somebody. So I wrote to you, and I thought if you responded, maybe I'd have somebody that I could talk to about how you felt and how I felt.
And your letter was absolutely right on deck. Those words, if you need help and you want to talk, I'm here. That's what I needed.
And so did I, or I wouldn't have written the letter. The last 22 years would have been hell without you, Lou.
It would have been hell without you, too.
Because what's in our hearts, we share.
When you're the mother and your child dies in that horrific way, the memory gets tolerable but never really goes away.
I don't know what I would do if on a bad day I couldn't pick up the phone and call you and share it.
Neither could I.
I woke up my husband. I said, you gotta get up. He had a construction company. I said, all your guys are gonna be waiting for you. And then he stood up and he turned around and looked at me and said, baby, something doesn't feel right. He had a stroke. And by the time we got to the hospital, they said there's nothing else they could do for him. So one of the worst things I ever had to do was open up that door with his mother and our children looking at me for hope. And I had to tell them that there was no hope. Within minutes of finding out that he was going to pass away, we decided to donate his kidneys and the liver. So why was it so important for you to meet me as your donor family?
I was struggling with the fact that I was allowed to live and someone passed. And I wanted a picture of the person who had been taken and allowed me to live.
Were you surprised at how young I was when I walked in? Because a lot of times people expect a widow to be a little old lady walking in.
Yes, and it was hard for me because here I was sitting across from you eating dinner with, literally parts of Marty in me, allowing me to be able to do that. And I think what set me at ease was your smile. Just like this morning when you got out of the car, you just have a real bright smile and it just allows people to relax. And then 3 days later, you decided to make the trip to go to the triathlon.
My daughter came with me, and we were waiting for you where?
At the finish line with the picture of
A
Marty.
big picture of Marty.
I remember going up and giving you a hug, and some woman took that shot of you and I hugging. And you don't see our face, but you see Marty's face peering out right at the camera.
That picture means a lot to me too, because all you can see is the person that brought us together.
I visualize Marty as my angel.
Yeah, I feel like Marty still has a purpose to help you live your life and see your grandchildren, and I couldn't ask anybody nicer to be able to live with my husband helping you.
Thank you.
When you were 2 months old, I had a pretty severe accident at work. The forklift that I was driving turned over on me and crushed my...
I was with a guy for 5 years. He was much older. He was really abusive towards me. After a while, when I tried to finally end it, he kidnapped me, held me hostage, and tattooed his name all over my body against my will.
Every time that you had to get dressed and undressed, you'd have to look at that tattoo and know where it came from.
Yeah, that's when I called you.
I do laser tattoo removal. When you walked in my office, it was deja vu. I knew the loneliness, the embarrassment, and I was so angry that life had done to you what it had done to me. You know, I myself had a tattoo of my ex's name, and he'd make constant references to it all the time, that he owned me. This is a person who locks his arms around your legs at night, and you have to ask for permission to use the restroom. So, you know, it's not just a tattoo. It's like being in a car accident. Every time you pass that intersection, you remember the impact. How do you see yourself today versus the very first time you came in my office?
I don't feel like this prisoner in my body anymore. You just helped me in so many ways. You're my counselor, like my mom, my big sister. You already know what I'm going through.
I'm extremely honored that you let me be that person. You know, I can be thankful that I walked out with my life, but I've lost time that I will never get back. I spent 28 years living in violence. I think if she can do this faster, then she gets to enjoy so much more of her life that I lost. And I hope you know how much I care for you.
To be honest, I'm just like, who am I for her to care about so much? I'm just a nobody. But you remind me that I am somebody. And I don't feel them.
That's all I could ask for. We're gonna make it. I refuse to let us fall.
So you were born in Chicago?
In Chicago.
Now what happened when you were deported to Mexico?
Well, when I was reported, what I remember is the way that the agents crashed to the house. Okay, people, line up against the wall. We were put into the trucks, taken to the train station, and then shipped out. I grew up when that happened. From 6 years old, all of a sudden, I felt like I was 15.
You hadn't been to Mexico before.
Never. I could speak fluent English, but not Spanish.
Now, how did you return to the U.S.? How did you come back here?
I was American citizen. So, in 1945, I was drafted into the Army. My father explained to me, he says, you got a little card from Chicago to join the United States Army. You're going back to the country. So, I took the bus to the United States, stopped in Laredo before we take off for Chicago. And I asked the bus driver, where's the washroom, sir? And he said, right around the corner. So I go around the corner, and I see a big sign. No Mexicans or dogs are allowed. And I said, welcome back. You know, it's a funny thing because when I talk about it, you know, it looks like yesterday. Those things, you never get rid of that.
How do you want to be remembered, Ruben?
I want to be remembered as somebody got hurt by his country, came back to this country, and is going to retire in this country.
So, what are some of your dreams?
Well, I kind of want to go to Mars and be an astronaut.
What do you think it's going to be like on Mars?
Red.
If you don't go to Mars, what else do you think you might want to do?
Maybe a video game tester.
A video game tester.
Even though a video game tester might be very exclusive.
It might be tough. I don't know how many of those job positions there are.
So, do you remember what was going through your head when you first saw me?
I thought you were so, can I say beautiful? Or do I have to say handsome?
Doesn't matter.
Well, you were both. I had always wanted to be a parent. So it was a dream I had, but I never dreamed would come true. Because Papa and I are gay. But we had some friends who started thinking about adoption, and that got us thinking. So we started into the process, and one day a FedEx truck came down the driveway, and they had a little picture of you. And I knew was good to be your dad. And it was wonderful. The first time I ever got to hold you, when I got to feed you your first bottle, I guess in a way I was concerned that you might be scared or nervous with these new people, but holding you up against my chest, it was just like you fit. Like we fit.
How has being a parent changed you?
Oh, it changes everything. Do you think about having a family of your own?
Yeah, sometimes. And like when I have kids, you'll get to meet them.
That's my dream too. I love you very much.
I love you too.
We were always meant to be together.
At 3 years of age, you walked over to the piano and you just started playing. And you played until you were, 17? You performed in the Metropolitan Opera Theatre. And I thought we might take up Juilliard's offer. They had granted you half the scholarship. However, you had made a decision to go in the military. That was devastating for me. And then you had an accident.
Yeah, we were doing our pre-deployment training, and I walked up to one of the vehicles, and I went to open one of the doors, and the door just kind of snapped 3 fingers. So they sent me to a specialist, and they were like, your finger's broken, right? You can't deploy with a broken bone in your body. To hear that you can't deploy because of less than a 1-inch piece of your body just seemed absurd to me. And I had a couple dozen junior Marines who expected certain things of me, and I promised them I would get out there as soon as I could. Ultimately, the specialist told me, we got 2 options. You can either try some treatment plan and you definitely won't deploy, or you just cut it off and you get on a plane. And I was like, cut it off. Because, I made a promise. I had to deploy. In some ways, that decision was difficult. In other ways, it was one of the easiest decisions I've ever made. I would be a very different person today, I think, had I graduated from music school and not joined the Marine Corps. But that's not a decision that I regret. I know that hurt you, and I'm sorry.
Well, I am so awfully proud of you. You have no idea. The fact that you have given all to your country over what I wanted for you, or even what you would have pursued, it says a lot for who you are.
Well, didn't give all. Many people gave a lot more. But, thank you. And, love you.
Love you too.
We had been feeling sick for a few days in a hotel room, thought we had the flu, and decided maybe we didn't. And of course, it was a good thing we got to the hospital because it was the first case of plague in New York City in over 100 years.
And for a married couple to both get the plague at the same time was an inconceivable thought.
They thought maybe we were terrorists or victims of bioterrorism. A few hours later that day, you were in a coma. So, what do you remember after you woke up?
What really struck me was, where have I been? I thought, what happened to Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's? And you told me that I'd been in a coma for almost 90 days.
What do you think kept you alive?
I think there's one of 3 reasons. The first reason is because I'm a tough son of a bitch. The second reason is because God just didn't want me at that particular time. The third reason is we knew my oldest son and his wife were pregnant with the first grandchild. And by God, I was going to stay alive to see that little grandbaby. If I just folded into a wet dish rag and gone to bed. I think it would have let a lot of people down.
So, why do you think we got it?
Well, in my opinion, it's just called bad luck.
I agree.
As an old West Texan would say, we drew the black bean. But, you know, I was in the hospital for a total of 224 days. If it hadn't been for you, from the very beginning, I would have died. Almost makes me cry.
You know what I think? If you can live through something like the plague, you can probably live through just about anything.
That's absolutely true. And we did it.
Together. That's how we'll keep doing everything else.
That's how we'll keep doing it till the day one of us really leaves.
Tim, talk about the day the restaurant opened. What was that like for you?
It felt awesome. I wanted to own a restaurant ever since I was a kid. That was my dream.
So when somebody comes to your restaurant for the first time, when do they get to see you?
When they come for that front door, and when they see me, they'll just melt into my arms for a hug.
So what's the hard part about having Down syndrome?
In school, I remember some kids called me the R word. I was not happy.
When you were in high school, how did you decide that you wanted to go to college?
I wanted to learn to be independent so I can become a businessman.
When your mom and I dropped you off that first day, Tim, we really didn't want to leave. Maybe around 2 o'clock, you looked at your watch and said, I think you guys better get back to Albuquerque. It's a long drive. And I still remember what it felt like to get in that car and drive away. It was one of the most scary and sad moments of my life. What was that like for you?
I pretty much stayed in my room because I was upset missing my mom and dad. That was the saddest part. I cried in my pillow. My pillow was nothing but tears. So I decided to knock it off and make friends. It didn't take long.
Did you have parties in the dorm and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, dance parties too.
Nice. So when you meet families in the restaurant and other places that have babies and little kids with Down syndrome, what kind of advice do you have for those families?
I think those families have somebody very special. Families tell me, you inspire my kid. There's hope for my son or daughter. And when I see people with disabilities, they tell me, Tim, I want to be like you. It's pretty cool. Hey Dad, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
How does it feel having a son with a disability?
You know, Tim, when you were born, I was filled with a lot of doubts about whether I could be a good enough dad to be your dad. And many years later now, I'm so happy to have you in my life. I'm very, very proud of you and what you've become.
Dad, you are the most loving dad ever. And Mom too. You guys are my superheroes. And having you in my life, that makes me special.
My name is Talana Banks. I am 9 years old.
My name is Willie. I'm 12. My name is Felicia Banks, and I am here with my son Willie and my daughter Talana.
So, how did it make you feel to leave us for your deployment?
Well, I remember that morning when I left. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I just prayed that we'd be together again. At first, I thought you were just going to the store or something, but then I noticed you weren't coming back. I probably did a poor job of explaining to you where I was going and what I was up against, but at your age, you shouldn't have to worry about me. I'm the one that's supposed to worry about you.
Why did you decide not to come back for a whole year?
Are you mad that I didn't come back for a whole year?
Yes.
All right. They give you 2 weeks of what they call rest and relaxation. So for me to come back for 2 weeks and then leave again, I thought it would just disrupt your lives. So I just decided to stay the whole year and come back at the end. So when I came back, how did you feel? I got really excited when I saw you coming towards us. I got the biggest hug in the world, and I didn't know if you were going to leave again Or not, I was just happy to see you. You've gotten so big, so I hugged you, I kissed your face. Yeah, and then Talana, I saw you.
I was confused. I didn't know who you were. And then I'm like, oh.
I remember the look on your face when you realized who I was. Your eyes got really big. You just started hugging me, I think you were choking my neck.
Well, I'm proud of you because you're serving our country. But I like when you're home.
I like being home. I love you guys. Love you too.
You're awesome.
I finally said, what am I doing? He's in Iraq, for God's sake. So I sent you a long email, and it just picked back up again. And then I went through other personal issues, getting divorced and everything, and here you were, getting shot at, and helping me out through that time. That meant a lot. And when you came home, that day, if it's not best day ever, it's top 5 days ever.
The interesting thing for us coming off the plane, it was a combination of best day ever and worst day ever. You hear all these people clapping for you. I don't want to say you don't feel worthy, but I'm here, 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and I felt I'm like I didn't deserve this kind of reception because you left a lot of guys and gals back downrange.
I think it took you a couple of months just to get adjusted.
It did. I still remember walking into Banana Republic with fatigues and buying clothes and just being like, 36 hours ago I was jumping on a Blackhawk. It was just bizarre. It didn't feel like home. I think for the first 3 weeks after I got back, I was looking at every opportunity I could find to go back down.
That's the first time I've ever heard that. Like you said, a lot of people didn't come home, but you are my brother, so I'm going to go ahead and still be happy that you did. That's why I still look back at that day in late March of 2007 and think, best day ever.
That day, I had a bad feeling. I immediately started scouring the news websites, and it said that they were 3 U.S. soldiers were killed in Khost, Afghanistan, and I knew, obviously, that's where she was stationed.
So how did you get notified?
I knew that any communication about Donna was going to come to you guys, because even though we're married, I wasn't considered her next of kin. So Donna's sister called me and told me that the military people were there. So I grabbed a copy of our marriage certificate. I went to your place, and I said, you know, I am her wife, and I brought documentation. The notification, the officer looks at it, and he looks at me, and he looks at it again. He goes, can I have a copy of this? And when soldiers fall in, they usually have a military escort that brings them home. And I said, can I do it because I'm military? He goes, well, we'll see. But I know it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for your insistence.
I did not want her coming home with a stranger. I wanted her coming home to family.
I was flown up to Dover to see her brought back on American soil. And honestly, I can't tell you how great of an honor it is to escort a fallen hero home. And then when that hero is your wife, it means a lot more. And I was given all her awards and all her personal documents that I had to turn over to you. And one of the hardest things for me was her wedding ring. I actually slept with him that night. I put her ring on with mine because I thought it was going to be the last time I was going to get to see it.
Wow. I gave you your ring back. I thought that was only natural. Because I don't know how the Army or any military does it. I just know what's fair is fair.
You know, I'm so thankful for everything you've done. It allowed me to be named as a spouse in the obituary, being given a flag and a private ceremony before the funeral, being given a second copy of all her awards, being allowed to sit in the front pew, and pretty much being treated as family the entire time, because in reality,
you married my daughter and that was it.
But if anybody else were in my shoes, they could have been completely shut out and not So I understand how blessed I am to be part of your family.
Well, I want you to know that I'm very proud of you. I consider you mine because Donna considered you hers, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
What was your first night back in prison?
I was shackled, hands and feet. I was disappointed in myself, and I was scared for you guys. What was the hardest part about me being gone?
Everything.
What did you tell people where I was at?
I didn't tell them nothing, but people kept saying, "Where's your mother?"
Did that make you feel like an outsider?
Yes. What did you think about while you were there?
Well, it made me really think about life and ask myself, who are you and who do you want to be? I wanted to be a better mother and learn more about being a mom. I wanted to hold you. I wanted to count your fingers. I wanted to brush your hair. I wanted to be with you.
What's the best part being out of prison?
Oh my God. That I have my family. This is what I'm living for. To be able to be a family.
Are you different now?
You know, I sometimes look back at the past and I say to myself, who was that person? And I thank you for being patient with me. And I thank you for still loving me and for giving me the opportunity to be your mother. What do you hope for the future?
That we never get split apart again and we stay together forever.
You're so special to me that I will always be by your side.
I love you.
I love you too.
We had to sit in the back of the class and stay after school and clean the erasers when the other kids didn't have to do that. But both my parents laid down the law, said you had to go to school. And I had to have been a junior in high school. My sister was the senior. Our high school counselor told us we didn't have to take the SAT test or the ACT test because we were Hispanic women. All we would do was have babies. So we went home and we told our parents, and my mother went in the back room and cried. And then that's when my brother said, it ain't happening. We were very lucky that he was over 6 feet tall. So he walked us down to school and he told our high school counselors, my sisters will take the test. But I remember in order to take the test, you had to have number 2 pencil. My sister and I, we had to walk the alleys to find pop bottles because that's when you could still turn them in and get money for them so that we could have money to buy the pencils to go take the test. We both scored really high. My sister got a 4-year scholarship to University of Nebraska, and then she got accepted into medical school. You know, my mother would always post her grades on the refrigerator. And if we got straight A's, they were on the refrigerator till the next time we got a report card. And my mother passed away 10 years ago. When she knew that she was ill, she had gone and started making photo albums of us kids. I expected to see family photos that we had of us, but I didn't expect to see the report cards in there. And I didn't expect to see the little graduation announcement when we graduated from high school. Those were in our photo albums too. One thing that made her feel really good was that all her kids went to school. She was very proud of them.
You had lost your job, you drank to excess, and you were stoned all the time. And it was like, what are we going to do?
You kind of threw out the idea
Of a private investigations agency.
involving you and I.
And by the next week, I was sitting on surveillance. So I just jumped into the deep end. We were so desperate. So we did crazy work for like no money.
What I clearly remember is chasing people for days for a $37 fee, but What it felt like to me was I was worthwhile at something again.
We have solved a lot of cases going through trash.
And that's what you do. I remember on this case going through the trash, and we're standing there with cameras taking pictures of it because I don't.
We always take pictures of the trash.
Yeah, nothing was like August, and it's particularly smelly.
The problem was it was attracting dogs, and I'm afraid of dogs. I was so scared.
And all of a sudden, we're doing lots of infidelity investigations, and it doesn't exactly inspire a great deal of romance in your own life.
I remember our relationship was limping along, but being forced to work together really forced us to deal with a lot of things.
It's tough, actually, to be on surveillance with somebody who's pissed off at you. I remember going to some sites, and we've been having some discussions on the way up there, because you drive a long time, you talk. And the next thing I knew, our conversations did get more positive, and there was more laughter. I know that our relationship really took off at that point. Our work relationship took off. Without the business, I'm not sure that we would have, made it. And now,
better than ever.
This is the relationship I wanted when I was 17 and didn't know that I could have. I wish that I could be in this relationship another 200 years if I could bargain with God. I mean, it's just like, I love you so much.
Dad found a love letter from a guy in my box of things, and he read this letter and lost it. He took me for a ride and dropped me off in the middle of the night with a $5 bill. That's sort of all I remember, sleeping outside in the country that night. And I really missed my brothers and sisters when I left home. I remember hearing that if you guys talked to me if I called the house that you'd get a beating because Dad didn't want you to catch gay. And you guys believed that.
Granted, it was a fear-based belief.
Of course, but it was still something I had to try to fix. And so as each of you guys moved out or got kicked out of the house.
Or ran away.
Or ran away in your case. I would make an effort to try to contact you guys and be a big brother again. At first, you were really resistant. You didn't know anything about gay people.
Didn't want to.
Didn't want to, and it took a long time for our relationship to build. But after you started to accept it, every time you met another gay person, you would say, "You've got to be my brother," and hook me up with every guy that you thought was gay. I always thought that was really sweet. And that's when we started coming back together, as brothers and sisters. Brian, Pam, Chris, Mike, Jude, Amy, Josh, and Luke Henry. Luke Henry, I didn't even know because he wasn't born till I was like 19 or 20, and I hadn't seen him in ever. And I got a call, and the voice on the other end said, "Brian, this is your little brother Luke." By this time, he was estranged from Mom and Dad, and he wanted to go to University of Dallas. So I took my savings, which wasn't a lot, and I bought one one-way ticket and one round-trip ticket to Dallas. Now, mind you, this is a Catholic school, and I'm the big gay brother. I'm running around getting him set up for his dorm room, and we go through this whole weekend, and at the end, I gave Luke a hug and a kiss and told him how much I loved him, and he started walking away. I was just watching after him like, wow, I really finally got to be a big brother. And at that moment, he turned around and mouthed, "I love you." It was the most beautiful moment I had ever experienced. And I called you from the hotel, sobbing. Do you remember this?
Yeah. You brought 8 siblings that were so far apart to be as close as we all became.
I just want you to know how much it means to me that you've loved me like this. And for that, I will be forever grateful. It is what I built the foundation of the rest of my life on.
And let me say that 40 minutes is not enough. I could do this for 4 hours, 4 days, 4 months. You're a good man.
Well, thank you, Mike.
about you wanting to quit?
Oh, absolutely. When I first won in 1970, when I won the primary at the South Carolina House of Representatives, there was this big party after the votes came in, and everybody was jumping up and down and very happy. But the next morning I went into the bathroom, and there on my sink was a little note from your grandmother. And the little note said, "When you win, brag gently. When you lose, weep softly." And I thought that was kind of interesting, and I stuck it up on the mirror in the bathroom. So we go into the general election in November, and when the polls closed that evening, around 10 o'clock, all the news media announced that I had gotten elected, that I was going to be a member of the South Carolina House of Representatives. About 3:30 in the morning, somebody rang my doorbell, and they told me that something had gone wrong down at the courthouse. And I went down to the courthouse, and they told me, rather than winning by 500 votes, we have determined that you had lost by 500 votes. The next morning when I went to my bathroom, I looked up at the mirror, and I wept softly. And yes, I thought then that this was the worst thing could possibly happen. But later on that morning, I determined that I was going to go forward. In 1978, I ran for Secretary of State and lost. 8 years later, in 1986, I ran for Secretary of State again and lost. And more than one person said to me, "Well, that's your third strike. What are you going to do next?" And I always said, 3 strikes may be an out in baseball, but life is not baseball. And so in 1992, I ran for the United States Congress. And this time, I won. I don't know, there was just something that kept telling me that you got to stick this out. And you know, we have a state seal in South Carolina, and the Latin phrase on the seal says, "Dum spiro spiro." While I breathe, I hope. And I've always felt that there's hope. And so I have never given up.
When you found out you were pregnant with me, like, what did you think?
I was very happy, and I was also scared.
Why were you scared?
Because I had never been pregnant before. I never had really an idea of how to care for a baby.
Did you ever feel like I was too much to handle, like, ever?
No. I think because I'm different, it might seem hard for me, but I was going to give it all I got no matter what.
When I was a kid, I didn't realize that you were different, and you actually had to tell me because I wasn't figuring it out.
I said to you, I said, "Myra, I know I'm not like your friends' mothers, but I'm doing the best I can." And you said, "It's okay, Mommy," and that made me feel so good. Has my disability affected your life?
I guess, like, when I was little, you had to go in for my parent-teacher conference, and, like, as a disclosure, I was like, my mom's disabled, but the day after the interview, my teacher had said that you seemed really intelligent, and it made me feel embarrassed.
Why?
Because I kind of felt bad that I had said that, and then you'd gone and you've been fine.
No offense taken, you're just giving her a heads up, right?
Yeah. What's the hardest thing that you've overcome?
Being hurt from people. Not physical, but just
like emotionally?
Yeah.
There were times when we would go out and people would just blatantly stare, and I would say something. I guess I'm kind of protective.
I'm really thankful because you understand me and you love me and you accept me, and thank you for that.
I don't know, you kind of make it seem like I tolerate you. I love you. You're a good parent, and just because you're disabled doesn't mean that you do anything less to me. You want me to succeed.
Yes, I do. I want you to make something of yourself.
I want you to know that even though our situation is unique, I'm happy that I'm in it because I'm happy that I'm with you.
Thank you, Mark. I feel the same way. I would never change it for anything in this world.
us met after work on Wednesday evenings, and that was a eclectic mixture of people.
We went to football games and concerts, and I still don't quite know how it happened. But instead of going in two separate cars, you and I would start going in the same car. I don't think we ever had a date.
That is true.
How did you decide you were wanting to love me?
That is not something that is decided, it's something that happens. I have been unmarried all my life.
Why didn't you ever marry?
Never found you.
I had never married either, and neither of us were exactly children. But suddenly, it was like it seemed right.
And I asked her to marry, and
I said yes.
She said yes.
We're confronting now some issues in our lives that are going to make the next 2 years different for us. I found out I had colon cancer, and in all likelihood, I have life expectancy of about 2 years now. But I want to tell you in this period that of anything that I have been blessed with, you are the biggest blessing in my life, and that I intend to spend this period of time as long as I can living.
Well, you hold the same position in my life, and I expect to live it with you and help you with it.
Thank you. You know how much I love you.
And you know how much I love you.
When I first realized that something may be not right, he got in the truck with me, and there had been an animal run over, I suppose a dog. And as I went around it, Lance just broke down crying. I pulled on over, I said, "Are you okay?" And he was sobbing. He said, "We tried once to go around bodies in Iraq, but we were ambushed. So we were told from then on, don't let anything slow you down." So he said, I had to run over people. And he said, I don't think I'll ever get that out of my mind.
That summer on his base, he found out that he could deal with his panic attacks and nightmares by taking pain medication, and he became dependent on it. He came home during the middle of the week. We said, "How did you get to come home during the middle of the week?" And he said, "Well, I just left."
Yeah, and then they couldn't get him to stay on base. So he was finally discharged with an other than honorable discharge. He was trying extremely hard to get back on track, but he went from a strong, independent young man to just, he couldn't do anything on his own anymore. He was just almost helpless.
He had a number of tattoos, and he had added a new one. It was a spider web. And I said, "What does this mean?" And he said, "Well, that's what I feel like I'm caught up in." The night that he died, he had panic attacks that day.
I remember him driving up, and I know he felt he had let me down, and I wish I had been more supportive at that moment. Now, if I could do it all over again, I'd give him a big hug and just say, "Don't let this be a stumbling block for you." You know, I didn't do that, and it was the last time I saw him alive.
Lance had actually been prescribed hydrocodone by the VA hospital. He was not supposed to have it because he had had problems with it. And he died from an accidental overdose.
We requested a military funeral, and it was denied.
He did everything his country asked him to do.
The Army reviewed all the information to get his discharge turned around.
And it was finally turned around. It was completely honorable, and his medals came in the mail in an envelope. But it was 2 years after he died.
talked about decorating the Christmas tree when I came home from school that day. But I walked into the living room, and my aunt was there, and she said, well, honey, Mommy passed away this morning. And I remember at my mother's wake, someone in my family came to me and said, Johnny, your teacher's here.
When I found out she died, I could certainly relate to that, because when I was 11, my own father died, and you just don't know how you're going to go on without that person.
When I returned to school, you waited until the other children left the room at the end of the day, and you told me that you were there if I needed you, and you bent over and kissed me on the head. It was really the only time someone said to me, I know what you're feeling, and I know what you're missing. And I felt in a very real way that things really would be okay.
Well, John, I really loved you as a student, and I'm so glad that I could be there with you for that time.
Many years later, when I became a teacher, I started to think more and more about you, and I started to think to myself, here I am with a memory of a teacher who changed my life, and I've never told her that. And that's why I finally wrote this letter. Dear Mrs. Doyle, if you are not the Cecile Doyle who taught English at Emerson School in Kearney, New Jersey, then I'm embarrassed, and you can disregard the sentiments that follow. My name is John Pruitt, and I was in your third grade class during the 1958-1959 school year. 2 days before Christmas, my mother passed away, and you told me that you were there if I needed you. I hope life has been as kind to you as you were to me. God bless you, always. With great fondness, John.
And you really could not have come at a better time, because my husband had Parkinson's, and he was going downhill, and I had just come home from the hospital, and I read this beautiful letter, and I just was overwhelmed.
Well, the funny thing is, when I finally wrote to you again after 54 years, I typed the letter. I was afraid my penmanship wasn't going to meet your standard. Well, after all this time, Mrs. Doyle, all I can say to you is, thank you.
What can I say? I'm just glad that we made a difference in each other's life.
Santa Claus was a byproduct of truck driving. Because I drive a truck, I can have a beard that's a little bit longer than most people. And one early November, my head was cold and I didn't have a hat, so I stopped at a Walmart. They had a rack of Santa hats right inside the door, and I picked one off and I put it on my head. And a little 4-year-old boy that was walking by with his mother yanked her to a stop and said, "Look, it's Santa!" And I have not spent Christmas Eve or Christmas Day at home with my family for the last 18 years. I'm usually in a rented red convertible, and I do under the tree gift deliveries that are designed for children to wake up and catch me in the middle of the process.
What are some of your favorite moments doing Santa Claus over the years?
One young lady wanted me to be her new stepfather. One young lady wanted me to provide her a maid. I've gone down to Tijuana, Mexico, and done it where I don't speak the language. In fact, one year when I was coming back, this young man comes running up to the side of the car, and when he saw me, his eyes opened and his jaw dropped. I gave him a really jolly ho-ho-ho, and I handed him this gift. And as I went across the border guard had seen me hand him something, and he looked at me and said, "You really must be Santa, and tonight I can't possibly stop you, so go ahead." As a Santa Claus, one of the big mistakes you can make is to not believe yourself. When I walk out of the house in my suit, I cease being me, and I absolutely am Santa, and no matter whether it's a skeptical teenager or somebody that wants to yank on my beard, it doesn't matter. What matters the most to me is I believe. And Santa Claus is truly the most important thing in my life.
It was after 9 o'clock. She called me at work. She said, "Stacy, are you watching TV?" the Trade Center's been hit. And we were commenting on that, oh my gosh, what could we do? We were talking about, we could go give blood. Maybe we could drive up or something to help people. And she said, Stacy, I've got to go. A really sharp tone to her voice. And she hung up the phone on me. I tried to call my mom's office back, and nobody answered the phone. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. And my coworker at the time said, the Pentagon's been hit. I ended up going to my parents' house, and I kept trying to call her, and I couldn't get a hold of her. So we spent the rest of the night, my sisters and I, calling the hospitals, trying to find her. And it was hard to get through to anybody because all the phone lines were blocked up. And finally, my father pulled up. She was not with him. He came in the house, and everybody else was upstairs, and it was just he and I. And I said, Dad, did you find her? And he just looked at me, and he started to cry. He put one hand on either side of the hallway, and he was sinking to his knees, and he said, Stacy, she's not coming home. This is it. I wanted to help him, but I was rooted in one spot. I didn't know what to say to make it better for him. And it took a month. It took a month before we had a body to bury. She was the finest person I'd ever known, and everyone misses her so much.
You and I were talking on the phone. He said, well, I have a medical condition that I probably should share with you. And so you told me about when you went missing for 9 months. And we both agreed that if that were to happen again, we could handle that. I said, I would be your memory. And eventually you called my mom and asked if you could have my hand in marriage.
You've told me that story several times, and I really wish I could remember that.
The first time you had an amnesia event with me, we woke up that day, said goodbye, and you jumped on the freeway. No one knows what happened from that point forward, because you ended up in Denver. I was going crazy, but eventually you got on TV and asked America to help you find out who you are.
What's the last thing you remember before you came to and realized you were in the middle of Denver?
Just picking myself up off the ground outside of a building downtown Denver.
Do you know if you've ever been to Denver before? Do you know if you're from Denver?
No, I don't.
You remember nothing about your past life?
No, nothing prior to September the 10th.
So I ended up calling the Denver Police Department, and that's when they told you who you were. We talked on the phone. I said, hi, I'm Penny, your fiance. You asked, did we have kids? What was your life like? It was like meeting you again for the first time. And when you came home, I didn't know what to do, and so I offered to sleep in the spare room, considering you didn't know me. But when you were home for a while, you called my mother again and asked her for my hand in marriage. And my mom was like, I already told you, yes. And so we got married on New Year's Eve.
That's my biggest regret about having these episodes, is that I forgot that.
We'll do it again, so you can remember it.
It's harder for you because you have the memories and the heartache. I just have nothing.
Yeah, every time you don't pick up the phone when I call, I panic. I think I'm going to lose you again. Someday, if it happens and you come home and you don't want to be back together, I would have to let you go.
You have no idea how thankful and grateful I am to have you in my life. After my last episode, when I came into the house, I knew I could trust you from the look in your eyes. I knew that that's where I should be. If I lose my memory again, I will still love you. I will always love you.
service was the way that he chose to go.
Did he call you and tell you that he joined the service?
He did. I could kind of see it coming, but I knew I couldn't talk him out of it. I just wanted to acquaint him with all of the implications of what he was doing. And he knew those. His first tour of duty was in Mosul. I will not forget the day that he called me, and he said, "I have to bury my sergeant today." He was in a vehicle. He stuck his head out and then fell back. And we tried to revive him, and we couldn't. So he knew all about casualties in the field. He'd seen it right in his lap. He chose to volunteer and go back for a second tour. He called me about a week to 10 days before he was killed in action. He said, "You know, I heard there was a shooting on a campus at a university in the United States, and that's all I know. And I know you work on a campus, and just wanted to know that you were okay." Now, of course, I was fine, but here he is in a combat situation. He's calling to make sure I'm okay. And it was the last phone conversation I ever had with him. He was killed on a road south of Baghdad. And the next morning, I went to the bedroom window and I looked out. And I saw a uniformed Army sergeant, a uniformed chaplain, standing on my doorstep. And you tell yourself, maybe they're going to tell me he's wounded, but
What was the hardest moment for you?
I think at the funeral home, the casket was open, it was whole, touched his forehead, knowing that we would close the lid and bury him the next day in Arlington, in Section 60, and not see him again.
How do you want Matthew to be remembered?
I want him to be remembered as somebody who cared about other people and who cared about his family back home. And he served his country, and that was his highest calling, and he did it with honor. That's how I want him to be.
So I get a call from a local funeral home. She said, "I've got a really big favor I want to ask. There's a kid that died. He'd been a member of the church all of his life. His parents were very active in the church. Mom sang in the choir. At any rate, he's 25 years old, and he died of AIDS, and he just happened to be gay." She said, when his pastor found out how he died, he said, "Well, you know, I'm not going to do the funeral, and it can't happen in our church."
So how did you respond to that then?
Didn't want to do it. It's not appropriate for one pastor to go against what another pastor has said. This is what I'm going to do in my congregation. And I was perfectly all right with that until I went home and started thinking about this family. You know, everything good that I've been able to accomplish has started with some kind of a burden, and AIDS burdened me. So reluctantly, I did the funeral, met the parents of this kid, and you know, I was used to black dads disowning their gay sons. That was the thing to do. My son can't be gay, but not this family. This father and this mother, they celebrated his life. They embraced all of his friends, and you know, they taught me more about unconditional love in that little experience than any of the Sunday school books and any of the courses in seminary or any of it. And that was the event that kind of rearranged my life.